we're going to be we're going to be continuing our play season today, talking all about associative play and symbolic play. Now, I'm sorry for a little bit of a break in episodes. I'm having major tech issues at the moment. I have a lovely laptop that has started to show its age, and here I was thinking, it got very offended when the laptop started dying. I was like, it can't possibly be on its last legs, like it's got some time still. And then I realized my laptop's almost 10 years old, so probably fair. Been some technical glitches and things that I've been working out in the background, but hopefully, touch wood, we're sorted. Hopefully. We'll see how we go. So today we're going to be jumping into associative and symbolic play. So just a quick recap from last time, we were chatting about some of those functional play skills, and the time before that we were talking a little bit about our parallel play and our onlooker play. So whilst last episodes really didn't focus that much on the social component within play, we're going to pull that back in together with what we're talking about today. If you haven't listened to the earlier episodes in this season, I really strongly do recommend you go back and have a listen, because it's one of those ones where we work on the building blocks, and it would just help you get that deeper understanding of some of the nuances in the play that we're going to be talking about for today, and some of the really important bits that this particular play stage helps our kids develop. And just before we jump in, just a little bit of a kind of plan for this episode today, but also the episode next week. So today we're going to be talking about those symbolic play skills, which are kind of some of our early pretend play skills, and so I'm kind of taking pretend play and pulling it apart a little bit into what those really early imaginative pretend play skills are. And so then when we get into next week, we can talk more into kind of cooperative play and more complex pretend play. But today's really going to be focusing on the kind of earlier elements of pretend play. So you might hear me reference it as pretend play within the episode because it still falls under that bigger umbrella. But it is next episode that we'll get into kind of the more socio-dramatic play, the really fun, complex pretend play when kids start to negotiate and do a whole bunch of fantastic, amazing, imaginative worlds that they create. So if you do hear me referencing it as pretend play today, that's because it kind of does fall under that umbrella, but we are going to be looking at some of those kind of earlier symbolic skills in what we're talking about today. Just in case I jump with bits of terminology, because plays, as we've been talking about, plays complex, plays kind of a little bit muddy. It's not always one thing of one and nothing of the other. It ebbs and flows a little bit, and so we can't be 100% clear-cut in our definitions always. But without further ado, let's jump into symbolic play. So symbolic play is this lovely, really fun stage of play where we start to use objects to symbolize something else. And so it might be assigning something an absolutely impossible function, like I'm going to, I don't know if you think of Little Mermaid, I'm going to use a fork to brush my hair and pretend that it's a brush. Lovely element of symbolic play. I'm going to get my toy Teddy to hold this cup. Now, Teddy can't hold the cup. A lot of the time you'll see the kid holding Teddy's hand to hold the cup, but within the symbolic play, Teddy is holding the cup, and we're kind of helping that elements of object substitution start to come in. Sorry, got the hiccups. It helps us build on from that functional play that we were talking about last episode, because it's where kids start to explore this element of creativity. It's where they start to go, ooh, this spoon is now a spoon, and we're in that real functional play. And then we go, well, actually, this spoon's now going to be a microphone, or this spoon's going to be a drumstick, or this spoon's going to be a snake, or whatever it might be, whatever the symbolic function is that I'm going to assign to it. Maybe it's lipstick, and I've watched Mummy put her lipstick on, and so now I'm going to try and copy, and I'm going to use the spoon pretending it's lipstick. It's where you see children start to explore some of those early skills. And if we think about the onlooker play that we were talking about 2 episodes ago, where we have this stage where kids will watch what you're doing and kind of have a look at what you're doing. And then we build in these elements of symbolic play. Well, I've seen Mum put her lipstick on. I can do that too, and I'm going to pretend that my lovely spoon is actually lipstick. And so then you start to see the elements of symbolic play start to come in. So it is where, at its core, is where we're using one object to represent another. So it's this imagining, early stages of imagination and early stages of pretend play where I don't need the physical object, but I can assign its value to this object. And sometimes that will be really explicit. And, you might get handed a book and say, look, it's the phone. Really explicit. They're telling us exactly what it is. And maybe it's, they've got maybe they've got a ball and they go, here, have some food. It's an apple. And you go, okay, like a little tennis ball or something. A lot of the time it starts off with something that's slightly more concrete. So a round tennis ball could then become a round apple because they're similar shapes, but it varies, and you can see kids will jump around quite quickly between what they're assigning value to. But yeah, so sometimes it can be really explicit, and our kids will be like, it's this, and you go, okay, great, thank you for the apple, thank you for the whatever it might be. And other times it will be harder to tell exactly what they've assigned that object as for the day. And so you need to kind of put on your detective hat a little bit and try and flip the script and do the onlooker play where we're watching what they're doing to try and figure out what the play activity actually is. And so it'll flip between the two. But it's this really, really nice stage of play because it's where we start to see these early imagination skills come in because we don't need the object anymore. So we start to move more into this world of, oh, this could be something else. I can remember what this object is and I can, use that memory to pretend that this is that. And so it's this higher level of cognitive problem solving that goes on to be able to engage in these little bits of, my toy becoming, like a toy block, for example, is now my phone. And I'm going to walk around and talk on my toy block. And for all intents and purposes, in my mind, it's the phone and I'm talking on the phone. But to everyone else, I just have a toy block in my hand. So what are some of the benefits of symbolic play? Why do we care about this play stage? It's my favorite question, the why. I love it when kids ask me why and they go through that stage of going, but why? But why? Why is the sky blue? Why do you have that? Why does your hair look like that? Why is such a powerful question? Because as we understand the why and understand why it's important and why we care about it and what does it do and what does it mean, all of a sudden we have this deeper appreciation and it makes it easier to start to carve out time for or prioritize different things because we know why we need to do it. Any therapist that I've worked with and families that I've worked with, I always end up having this conversation of, I love the word why. I love a why. And so why do we care about symbolic play? I've touched on bits of it before, but it's where we start to develop this abstract thinking and some of our cognition skills develop that we need to start to engage in some of that further problem solving that we get at a later stage. It's kind of the building blocks to start being able to take someone else's perspective, understand something in more abstract, be able to, follow somebody else's pretend play idea, being able to accept somebody else's idea, even though I can't see it myself. It's those early skills of being able to step into a pretend play world where there are no rules, or there are rules, but they're different rules. And I can follow what those different rules are because I can stay in this abstract. And I can start to substitute objects to do different things. So as I'm problem solving, maybe I don't have a hammer, but hey, maybe I do have, a fork, and I can use the back of the fork to pretend to be a hammer because that will do a similar job. And so it has this really powerful space for problem solving within play, but it also has this really powerful space for problem solving in life in terms of figuring out what is similar in different objects and what can I substitute, but what can we do different jobs as well, and helping kids start to draw some of these connections to be able to then embrace some of these problem-solving skills and persist through some of these challenges that they will inevitably face a little bit easier as well. And not only is it great for developing some of those problem-solving skills, but it also starts to have up very early bits of play and sequencing skills. And what I mean by sequencing skills is instead of it kind of play being one repetitive action to stop and change to another repetitive action, for example, I have a pencil, like if we think back to some of the functional play that I was talking about, a child's moved from I have a crayon and I can bang the crayon and do all this stuff with a crayon to I can scribble with a crayon. And then we move into this more symbolic play. Well, I can scribble with the crayon, but then I can pretend that actually I finished my drawing and now I'm using my crayon to maybe be a pointer to point at what I've got on my drawing. And so I've taken what I've got and I'm using the tools that I have to extend on that play and extend my play script. It could be, a child who's playing with cars and I was driving my cars along the ground, but I ran out of cars. And so now I need another car because I want to extend on my play script and I want to have a longer sequence in my play. But hey, there's a block there. So now that blocks a car as well. So now I've got enough cars to keep going. Or maybe I want someone else to join in my play, but I only have one car. But I do have this random object that's sitting around. Maybe it's a container, maybe it's a little cardboard box, whatever it could be. So that's now a car so that you can play with me so that we can keep playing. So you start to see this problem solving that comes in to keep extending on these play sequences. You might see it in, early bits of imaginative play around cooking and maybe I'm pretending to cook in the kitchen and I'm making a salad and I've got blocks in the salad and I've got a bit of cutlery in the salad and I've got, a scrunchie in the salad because that was nearby. I've got a bit of paper in the salad and I come over and go, I've made the salad. And so in terms of sequencing and steps, I've picked different ingredients and therefore needed multiple object substitutions to get to this bigger goal of I'm cooking, but the smaller part of that is I'm going to make a salad when I'm cooking. And so some of our kids' play scripts in this stage do start to extend and become more complex. And we'll dive into this more next episode when we start to talk about the more socio-dramatic play when we move into cooperative play. But a lot of the problem-solving skills that kids develop in this stage do help with sustained sequencing and sustained play scripts. And then we get this lovely element of object substitution. And so I've talked about it a lot, but it's that whole using an object for not the intended purpose of the object and pretending that it's something else. And that helps for all of that early sort of, mind blank, what's the word? Early abstract thinking skills. There we go. Word came to me in the end. So now that we have an idea of what this symbolic play is, how can we support symbolic play? What can we as adults do to help our kids start to build some of these symbolic play skills? And my number one's going to be just play. But how do we play? What can we do? Well, the number one thing we can do is model object substitution. Maybe it's bath time and everyone's in the bath and, you've got some toys in the bath or you're splashing in the bath and then maybe your really early one is getting, a cup of water and going, it's going to rain and tipping the water from the cup to make it rain. Is it actually raining? No. Are we starting to pretend that it's raining? Yes. Maybe it's getting, a bath toy that you've got or a sponge or something and going, pretending that it's suddenly a submarine or it's a boat. And it's going along the top of the water and you're making a vroom, here it comes, it's going to crash sounds. But what you've actually got is a sponge. And it's just really embracing that playfulness that you've got. Maybe if your kid has some rubber ducks and they're all doing things, maybe the ducks talk, maybe the ducks turn into cows, maybe, you'd be really silly. And you can judge where your kids are ready for it as well. Because if your kid goes, no, that's so silly, that's a duck, you go, oh, I was being silly. I was pretending. But you're right. It is a duck. Let's play with the duck. And so you can kind of have this easy out every time. And you can challenge your kids a little bit and they'll laugh and it's silly and we like being silly and that's funny. And then if they're going too far, you can go, I was just being silly. Mum was just being silly. Dad was just being silly. We're okay. You're right. And you can kind of bring it back and ground it back in that reality, particularly when this is a newer skill for some of our kids to learn, or they're just starting to move into this symbolic play. It will be hard work for their brains to follow what we've done, because that's not what that is. And I've worked really hard my whole life to learn what these things are. And now all of a sudden we're calling it something else. And so you can always use that out of, oh, you're right, I was so silly, to kind of help that play continue. Maybe you could do, modeling bits of object substitution if you're getting dressed. And maybe Teddy gets dressed and you use a towel to get Teddy dressed in his, in his beautiful dress. Well, it is a towel or a tea towel or whatever. And, maybe Teddy gets dressed first and then your kid gets dressed, or you help your little one get dressed and then they can help Teddy get dressed. And you're doing those early bits of object substitution with them and just opening their eyes up to different things that we can do. And just modeling that little bit of freedom and flexibility and playfulness that we can have within play. Another really nice one to do is just having pretend play objects around. And I don't mean having 15,000 toys, but, when you're having food, maybe you're having food and then maybe Teddy's having food at the table and you're pretending to feed Teddy. And modeling, and maybe, there's imaginary air food that you're feeding Teddy, or maybe you're balancing a block to feed Teddy. Going to bed, maybe you're, as a part of your bedtime routine, you take Teddy to bed as well and put Teddy to bed on the floor and give him a little blanket that's actually a tea towel. All of those bits help to develop some of these symbolic play skills as well, and, give meaning and bring attributes to things that don't necessarily have those things. Teddy doesn't need to sleep. Teddy is a toy, but Teddy can sleep. And we can start to have those bits of playfulness and start to look at, or maybe the car goes to sleep and it's night time for the car if your car's your favorite toy, or maybe it's a, Buzz Lightyear toy, or maybe, whatever the toy of preference is for your child. And it doesn't have to be a more human-based toy, so like a doll or a teddy. It could be a car, because again, this symbolic play is where we're saying that this is something else. So the car needs to go to bed, and that can help build some of these symbolic play skills. My absolute favorite for symbolic play, one of my favorite toys in general, are just blocks. We can build from just building up to building a tower, and then I'm going to use my hands to jump over the towers, or, we're going to have something else come in and crash all the towers down. I'm going to say, oh no, it's a dinosaur. Here comes the dinosaur. Well, actually, the dinosaur's my hand, or the dinosaur is, a bottle that I've grabbed, or it doesn't matter, but it's something else, and I'm calling it a dinosaur because it's going to come in and crash everything down. And blocks are a really nice one because you can do so much with them. You could make, 3 blocks together and go, oh, it's a house. And they go, it's a tower. And you go, no, it's a house. And they go, it's really a tower. And you go, this one's a house. Let's build another one that's going to be a tower. And so you can start to attribute those bits of meaning within play and engage in that little bit of playfulness to help them start to do these early bits of symbolic play. The other really, really powerful one is following their lead. And this is what we always want to be doing in play, is really looking at what they're doing in their play script, following their lead, engaging in their play script, and then I'm just going to add just a little challenge to it. I'm just going to extend on it in just a little way and see, well, what tweak could I make here? So what I mean by this is, let's say, what could you be playing? Let's say you're playing cars. Well, let's say your child's playing cars and they've got their cars and they're driving around and they're having a great time. Well, you can go over and join them and have a car too and follow what they're doing. If they're taking cars and crashing into each other, then you can have your cars and crash into each other. Or if they're lining their cars up, you can line the cars up. If we're going around a circle in a loop, you follow and go around a circle in a loop. But then once you're kind of in their play, you might add a little bit of a challenge. You might go, oh, this is a really big hill. Oh, this is so hard. The car's coming. Now you're pushing them on the ground, but you're using your voice to narrate that, oh, something's changed, and see if they'll accept that. Or maybe you change go, oh, where are we driving today? I'm going to drive to, and I'm going to leave that pause, see if the kid's going to jump in and go, we're going to go to the pool, or we're going to go to home, or we're going to go to school. And if they don't, then you might go, I'm going to go to the shops. And you drive off to the shops and you stop at, I don't know, next to the couch leg might be the shops. And then you drive away from the shops and you go back to what they're doing. And then maybe a little bit later you go, oh, I'm ready to drive somewhere else now. I want to drive too, and see if they'll bring and share an idea as well there. And if they don't, then that's okay. You can bring another idea in, but it's just this idea of helping them start to expand on their play scripts. Where else could this car be going? What else could this car be doing if they're interested in already playing with cars? If they're interested in playing with Teddy, what else could Teddy do? Is Teddy hungry? Is Teddy sleepy? Does Teddy need some clothes? Does Teddy need a bath? Could we pretend put Teddy to bed? All of these different sequences that we could do, particularly when we're looking at what could we do that matches up with life and experiences that they know. So if they don't normally go to the shops, then shops is going to be a really tricky one for them to do symbolic play around. But if we drive to the park a lot, well, then park's going to be a much easier one. And so looking at their daily routines and going, well, which bits of that can we match up with to start to do these early bits of symbolic play? What else can we do? Oh, last one, and then we'll jump into associative play. But unstructured play is so powerful in these bits of symbolic play. So having things around that aren't actually obvious playthings, so empty cardboard boxes, bits of Tupperware, plastic lids, plastic containers, all of that stuff is fantastic, because whilst you can do a lot with it in that kind of earlier play skills that we were talking about, those more exploratory play, when we're doing some of our early cause and effect play, as we start to move into more of our symbolic play, well, then all of a sudden, a plastic container can become a hat. It can just as easily become a tower or a stepping stones, or, a cardboard box can become a race car or a spaceship, or it can become, a hideaway, or it could become a boat, or so much. Just let your imagination run wild. And if you're stuck with ideas of what things could be, I kid you not, kids' books are full of really nice ideas. And actually, you can steal a lot of ideas from different books at nighttime reading with your kids. If you're reading a book and they're talking about going to the moon, well, then maybe in play tomorrow or later in the week, you can do some play around, we're going to go to the moon and be astronauts, because they've read that in the book, and you can help them kind of bring that out a little bit. It's a really, really great spot if you're struggling with ideas to start to pull some ideas from. But as always, if you're having any difficulty coming up with different ideas, just shoot me a message over Instagram or send me an email, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have. But they're kind of the biggest takeaway in terms of this is play with your kids, be silly, and embrace the doing something silly and having the little bit of a challenge to what they're doing. Is how we can start to help them support some of these symbolic play skills. So that's kind of the skill progression side of play. Now we're going to talk about a little bit more about the social progression side of play. And this is what we call associative play. So if we think about the social side of play, we left it off at onlooker play. And this, if you don't remember, go back and have a listen to the episode. But a really quick whistle stop on onlooker play is where we have kids that are watching what others are doing, but not actually actively engaging or copying what they're doing. They're just kind of sussing it out and having a bit of a look. When we move into associative play, this is where we see kids that will start to interact with others around them around a common activity, but without really clear organisation. So they're all kind of doing the same sort of thing, but there's not a clear organisation, plan or goal among the children. Once we get that, we start to move into more cooperative play. But this associative play is when we have those kind of early shared play experiences. We're having interest in what others are doing around me. I'm sort of starting to include people in my play world, or I'm wanting to be included in their play world, but to kind of do a similar thing and be there with you, but not to actually have a goal that we're talking about and working towards. So what this can look like, because sometimes I find it's easy to think about what these things would look like before we actually start to break them down a little bit. And so bits of associative play can look like kids at the playground that are all sharing the play equipment, following each other around. I'm going up, you're going down, we're climbing over here, but we're not really talking to each other as much. We're just kind of doing together. It might be we're playing with similar toys, but we're not maybe we're building a tower, but I'm not telling you what I'm doing, you're not telling me what we're doing, but we're building very, very similar towers with each other. And if one was to leave that play interaction, the other kid might follow them because the part is actually, I'm enjoying doing something with you and not just sharing your resources, but we're doing something together, but we're not necessarily having that bigger picture goal happening. Dancing's a great one for associative play. We're all dancing, we're all having fun, we're all moving together, but we're not doing a coordinated ballet dance, for example, where there's sequencing and steps and stuff involved. Things like arts and crafts, where we're, working together and using different materials and having that real shared enjoyment of I'm here and doing this and I'm looking at what you're doing and I might take ideas of what you're doing and put that into mine, but we're not talking about or working on one art piece together. And then early bits of role-playing activities with other kids you'll start to see come into this as well. So it's where we see kids might begin to share resources. We might see kids that are, riding bikes or scooters and just kind of following each other around and having a hoot of a time and lots of giggles and lots of laughter, but we're just kind of riding in circles. And so this is where play can get really complex for parents and adults as we look on, because it's not really clear what they're doing and they're just playing. But how are they playing? What are they actually doing in this associative play stage? It's where you can see these elements of, instead of just playing alongside or watching someone else, I'm actually going to play with you. I'm going to engage with you in this activity, and the person becomes more important instead of just complete loss of train of thought. Associative play is where you'll start to see these kids and, the interest in the other person is getting a lot stronger, and I'm watching what you're doing, and that's more interesting to me than just watching and sharing something. So if you think back to our onlooker and our parallel play, where you've got kids that might share a resource, but they're not really bothered if someone's there or not. If someone walks away, they'll probably keep going. It's just that kind of early bits of watching what other people are doing. Associative play is where we start to see that more social intent, and we're playing together. We don't really know how we're playing together or how we're structuring our play together yet, but I'm here and I'm playing with you, and we're running around like crazy. And this is where, if we think of some of those symbolic play skills, they become so important, because we need this level of flexibility to be able to join in and follow with someone else's play. And so it might be that we're, blocks are on my mind a lot today, building blocks together, but I run out of blocks and I can use something else to keep going with this play, to stay within this play with somebody else. So, how can we support associative play for our kids? What can we do as adults to support them to develop some of this? Number one is having opportunities for them to interact with peers their own age. Helping them have those opportunities to watch what other kids are doing, think back to onlooker play, and then start to maybe prompt, I can see what they're doing. I wonder what you might want to go and join. And being a little bit explicit in describing. So maybe when you get to the playground, you can say, there's some kids over there on the swings. That's interesting. And they're going fast. And there's some kids over there running around. And I can see some kids that are going up and down the slide. And so I'm narrating and supporting that onlooker play, because remember, all of these bits of play are going to be kind of commingling at the same time, so that then when my kid might go and join the play, they've got a bit of an idea of what they're going to be doing. What are you doing? Therefore, what am I doing? And how can I join this? And so maybe their preference that day would be to go and do the chasing. And so they know, right, I know where the kids are that are doing the running. I can go and join the running. I don't know what we're running for. I don't know where we're running to, but we're running and I can do that. Setting up for success. And so looking at opportunities where you can have, if you're having a play date, for example, having the resources out that are going to support bits of this play. So not just having one of something. Or if we have one of something, how can we do a slightly structured activity that's going to support a little bit of that, maybe narration, or maybe that early sort of symbolic play skills to help those kids stay within that play. Or if it's out in the backyard, what could we do in terms of running and chasing and supporting those opportunities to set up our kids for success? Park and playground trips are great for this. When we can have huge bits of movements going on with our associative play, it's fantastic. The number of times, and you notice as you take your kids to the playground now, and you'll see kids that are just running. And it's not chasing, it's not tag, it is just running. Or kids that will go up and down the slide and up and down the slide and up and down the slide, and they won't get tired of it, and there'll be a little group of them doing it together, and they're loving it. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful associative play. The other bit that we can do in this is start to model some of that early turn taking and support your kids through that, being like, oh, I know, that's so exciting. I'm watching them too. We're just going to wait, and then we can have a go. And so helping them and talking them through that experience so they know what's going on and they know what's happening and they know that they're okay, but then they're going to have a turn in a second. It's not the kind of forced turn taking of my turn, your turn, but more the understanding of I can watch what someone else is doing and I can enjoy what someone else is doing, and then I can have a go too. That really, really early turn-taking skills to support these kids to stay within these associative play and keep going within play. Because the biggest skill that kids learn through play, and that we can help kids learn through play, I should say, is some of these persistence and problem-solving skills that you'll hear me talk about a lot. But it's just, how can I keep going? I'm enjoying this. How can I make this keep working for me so I can keep enjoying this? Because it's hard work for our brain. And I think so often as adults, it's so easy to forget that play is hard work, particularly for kids' brains that are working hard all the time because there's so much new information that they're taking in. And so the more that we can set things up for success so that they can engage in that problem solving, have those successes in a really positive way, we can support their regulation through it. If you haven't had a listen, go back and have a listen to our regulation and early years season, because you'll see bits of this that tie in around, well, actually, I'm going to make a little bit of a challenge and then I'm going to support you through that challenge. Very, very similar to when we have kids that go through periods of dysregulation. It happens to everyone. How we can catch those earlier dysregulated moments, help us calm, help us get through it together to go back to something again. And it's always that kind of, how can I stay within this? How can I go back to it? Is the really big core of what we're trying to help these kids develop. But that comes to the end of our symbolic and associative play episode. As I said, next week we're going to be talking about some more of our pretend play and our socio-dramatic plays, like cooperative play sort of play stage. And then I think we'll just have probably one more episode after that, and then our play season will be done, which is crazy. Again, sorry for the bit of a delay between episodes. Hopefully I'm almost seeing the end of my technical issues. I really hope so. But as always, guys, please rate and review the podcast, share it around with your friends, anyone you think might, enjoy listening to it. It is here for all parents, teachers, carers, OTs, speechies, physicos, whoever wants to listen to learn a little bit more about kids. It's for you guys. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. But that's all for now. I hope you all have a lovely week, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye, guys.